Hi, I'm Leda Meredith, and I'm going to be sharing some information today about Purslane, called Ridgela in Israel. Portulaca oleracea is the scientific name, and I actually just saw some for sale at the Shuk, which is awesome, but even more awesome is that it's growing everywhere for free. Now, I always talk about sustainability in all of my books. It's really important how you forage, that you're aware of whether a plant is invasive or endangered, and that you harvest in a way that does not endanger any particular ecosystem or plant species. Now, in the case of purslane, it's all good news because this plant is quite invasive, is even considered a quote-unquote weed, and so you do not have to worry about how much purslane you're harvesting. This is purslane, Portulaca oleracea. And just to start with ID, you'll notice it has a succulent kind of a look with thick stems. Smooth margined, kind of spade-shaped leaves. The stems often have a reddish tinge to them, not always though, but often. And I'll also post a photo of the little yellow flowers and seed capsules. This is a low-growing plant. So what you're seeing right now, I'll put my hand in the picture for comparison. This is about as big as it's going to get. Often it'll be actually much lower and smaller than this. And it is an annual that pops up from seed in disturbed soils. And what does that mean? Disturbed soils are what us humans are constantly creating in gardens and parks and farms. So it is a common quote-unquote weed in those situations. Here you can see a little more of that reddish coloration on the stems, and you can also see that somebody before me was harvesting here. That's always fun to notice that there was a previous plant person collecting. It only shows up in warm weather, so even in mild winter climates, as the temperatures cool down, let's say for the rainy season, it will die back. And then it won't be until things really warm up again and nighttime temperatures are reliably cozy that it will start to show up. The entire above ground plant, the stems, the leaves, the flowers, which I'll show you in a moment, the seeds, are edible. All the parts above ground are edible, and they have an interesting, I don't know if you're going to call it medicinal or nutritional property, which is that this is one of the few plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids. So flax seeds are another, chia seeds, and purslane. Otherwise, people tend to get their omega-3s from seafood and non-plant sources. So this is a really good one to know. Omega-3s are famously anti-inflammatory and have a whole bunch of health benefits. An important foraging skill is to recognize when there are two plants growing together and make sure you have the right one. Now right here we have two very different plants with very different properties growing, kind of intertwined. This right here is the purslane that we've been talking about, but this one is rue, Rutica raviolens. So here's rue, and here, growing up through it, is purslane. All right, so how do I know the difference? Well, for one thing, the rue does not have the reddish stems. The stems are just green. And the purslane has that reddish coloration to the stem, but a much better giveaway is that purslane has basically no smell. Whereas if I pick this one, rue has this very unmistakable, strong scent. There is another plant that is sometimes mistaken for purslane by novice foragers, and that's a spurge, or euphorbia. It's a lower growing plant, less succulent, more stringy, but similar shaped leaves, also with reddish stems. The big giveaway there is that the euphorbia, which is poisonous, has a milky latex when you break the plant, whereas you can see with the purslane, No milky latex, no nothing oozing out of there whatsoever. Of Portulaca oleracea, Purslane, that it is scentless and has no milky latex. So just to go over those comparisons again, I don't like to say that plants have lookalikes. They don't really, but they may have look similars. And in the case of Purslane, you saw the rue that one plant was growing intertwined with, and that looks similar, but rue is aromatic and Purslane is not. The other plant that I mentioned is spotted spurge, Euphorbia maculata, which grows in very similar low-growing sunny habitats with Purslane, but it does not have the succulent stems that Purslane has, and it does have a white milky latex that oozes out if you break the stem, whereas Purslane does not have that. So again, if you've got Purslane, it will have juicy succulent stems but no milky latex, and it is not an aromatic plant. Purslane is edible both raw and cooked. It's fantastic pickled, especially if you find some with really nice thick stems. You can just pinch the leaves off, save those for a salad or something, and just pickle the stems, which keep a nice bit of crunch to them. Now the whole plant when it's cooked is a little bit mucilaginous, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. In my book, The Forager's Feast, I have a recipe for Purslane relish. Now most cucumber relish recipes add cornstarch to thicken the relish, but because of that mucilaginous property in the Purslane, you don't need it. You can also use it instead of okra. It's not quite as mucilaginous, slimy as okra, but has a similar thickening power in things like Creole gumbo. I've got a recipe for that up on my website at ledameredith.com, and here's a pic of it. Okay, I hope this has been informative and that you will make the most of this wild, free, healthy, and delicious plant. I also want to mention, if you head over to my YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/ledameredith, I've got a video on making Purslane relish that I mentioned earlier, and a lot of other plant and wild edible plant related things. You can also go to my website, ledameredith.com. If you are in the US, I urge you to order my books through my website. It'll take you to a little indie book shop run by some friends of mine. If you're outside of the US, then probably the Book Depository is going to be your best bet. And for my Ancient Roots Israel friends, the 3 books that I wrote and photographed most of in Israel, and that would be the most appropriate, are Pickling Everything, The Skillful Forager, and The Forager's Feast.